Welcome our viewers to the Oromia Media Network occasional discussions with scholars. Today we're going to be discussing the border issues in the Oromia National Regional State and the Somali National Regional State. We know that in beginning last month, there have been regular skirmishes in the border areas and clashes, and the regular attacks by armed gangs started in December 2016, 2 months after the Ethiopian government imposed a state of emergency to quell a year-long Oromo protest. Since then, the so-called Somali special forces have been making incursions into the Oromo villages in the Oromia regional state, killing residents and confiscating properties. Today, the special forces have continued to their incursions into Oromia, causing tremendous losses of life and dislodging Oromo residents from their homes. And according to reports that are coming in today, hundreds of people have already been killed, thousands displaced, and Oromo residents in the Somali regional states are being picked up and trucked and dumped in the Oromia region. Dead bodies are also hauled around. This conflict has now been escalated to some disturbing areas. And to discuss these issues with me are Professor Mohammed Hassan, Professor of History at Georgia State University, is a very well-known commentator, and Professor or Dr. Abdullah Muhammad Ahmed Hassan, joining us from Berlin. He will say more about him, and let's get started by asking him to introduce himself to our viewers.
I'm Mohammed Ahmed Hassan, born in Dhaka, and known as Zakaria Ahmed Hassan. I've studied in Berlin. I've studied sociology and political science, and I wrote 2 books already. And writing my 3rd book. The first book was concerning about Somalia. The second book was concerning about Ethiopia. And the 3rd book now I'm writing about is about illusion. Something about what is the illusion, and concerning about the independence of Africa. Is our independence in Africa is such kind of illusion, concerning the new movement of French. A lot of people dying in the Mediterranean Sea and in the Sahara. This book concerns about to Europe. What is the reasons behind it? And do we feel comfortable in Europe or in America when we leave our countries? Is it kind of an illusion that we are living in? Well, this one book that in the meantime I'm writing. The second book was concerning about Ethiopia, which I was comparing in the first part about the Geda system with a Fetah Negest. It's the 2 things. It's the ideology of Ethiopianism. How did it come to existence? And what did happen to the Oromo Geda system of about the Oromo democracy? Why didn't it develop? Like the Somali, we have got the hairs and so on. It never developed. And why did this kind of Fetah Negest and its ideology, religious ideology of Ethiopianism came to existence? And that's what we are now living in the state of Ethiopia. We are living in this such kind of ideology, and this kind of ideology is messing the people, and that's either psychologically or politically, and that's what we have since generations, since Menelik, Haile Selassie, and so on. Mm-hmm. That's what they're implicating to us. this is the system of the Ethiopianism ideology, and this is what we have to talk more about it. Are we going to struggle with this kind of ideology of Ethiopianism?
Excellent. Thank you so much. We can't ask for... Yeah. Thank you so much. So we can't ask for better experts than yourself and Professor Muhammad Hassan. Let's get into the issues. Let's get the issues that we're assembled here to discuss. You both are experts in that area, in that specific area, and that is a very important, relevant information to highlight. So the history of the relationship between the two peoples is probably not known to many of our viewers, and especially the English-speaking audience. Let me start with Professor Muhammad Hassan. As a scholar, and as a person from the eastern part of Ethiopia, what do you know? And here you can talk about your expertise and also your own experiences with the Somali people. How do you describe the historical relationship between the Somali and the Oromo, especially in the area of clashes today?
Thank you, Skel. This is a very broad question. I will be talking the rest of the evening. But first, let me say, Professor Muhammad, it is really a pleasure to meet you on this forum. And I am glad to know you, and I hope we'll keep in touch. Skel, as you rightly said, I grew up in Harar. Actually, I was born far from Harar, but went to elementary school in Harar. And when I was in school, almost most of my friends were Somalis, and I grew up with them. The Somalis and Oromos are closely related people. This much is very clear in terms of culture, language. Andrasky, a very famous, a well-known scholar on Somali language, says 40% of words that the Somalis and the Oromo speak are in common. Basically, 40% of the words are in common. And as people who are neighbors, the Somalis and the Oromo have lived for centuries side by side. Sometimes, of course, clashing over grazing ground, access to water resources, but those conflicts were resolved as much as possible through traditional mechanism, because those conflicts were not initiated by the state actors. Those conflicts were really not planted, basically, and across centuries, people were really able to solve, limited conflict. Now the conflict we are witnessing in Eastern, in the Southern, and the conflicts in Somalia itself, these are all part of foreign intervention, the invention. In a nutshell, the conflict that is now developing on the border between the regional state of the Somali regional state and Oromia is really, to some extent, it was the creation, the invention of the TPLF. Why do I make this statement? In July, there was a conference in London. I attended that conference. I actually made a presentation on the topic of Leopolis. And it was in preparation for that presentation, I really started reading about the Leopolis, when it was formed, the purpose for which it was formed, what it did in Ogaden, in the Somali regional state itself, before it started attacking the Oromos in the eastern and the southern part of Oromia. And if you want me to go into details of what it did, I'll be delighted to do it.
I will definitely ask you about that question. But first, let's talk about the history of relationship, the relationship between the Somali and the Oromo people historically, as you know it, but also adding your own personal experience about, as a Somali. Why don't I come to you, Professor Zakaria is the name that you like to be called on.
First of all, is it's the way Professor Mohammed said. I was born in the Redawa, and I had the same experience life like Mohammed. All my friends were Oromos. We used to play football. We used to play together, and we were all neighbors. And almost, our language was a mix of Oromo and Somali. Though the Somali language, 40% of the both language, the word the professor said, is similar, but sometimes we used to mix with the Somali and Oromos. Abo ya akhi khalli, abo tao, abo this. Just we were mixing a lot of the language. And we grew together. My mother speaks first of all perfect Oromo. My brothers at the same time, but I grew, in Addis Ababa. That's why I speak a very, very, very little bit of the Oromo language. And anyone in the Redawa, or whether an Oromo or Somali, he's bilinguistic. Either they speak both language, Somali and Oromo. Historically, we were intermarriage. I never knew, and I never in my own life, till now, the situation is became to a political, came to into a politics. I never knew that I was a differ from an Oromo. This difference never existed. Even with the identity, I would have identified myself, with the people I was growing up. And we were almost the same identity. And that's why, if you take the identity of the Oromos and the Somali, if you said, the identity, if you go back the identification, it's the same. It's the same identity. So that if somebody grown in the Oromia region and comes to in the Somali region, mostly he's identify himself where he grown up, and that's almost we always do this identification with the Oromos. And now if we go then if we come now to this situation, this situation is a political. The way the professor said, there were clashes, and the clashes, in the rural regions where there's the water and sometimes the grazing system and so on. That was the clashes. But this kind of a political situation, what's now happening, is really is something new. It's something new, and that's that we want is unacceptable.
Well, that's important to underscore first that Oromo and Somali are brothers. And when we say they are brothers, they're literally brothers because they grew up in the same space. They shared experiences, soccer, football, and other things. They shared language. They shared land. They shared culture. They have similar social structure. And as we were saying, as Professor Zakaria, you were also talking about the Gada system. There is a lot of sharing and there is a lot of exchange between these two. And as brothers, they may have had some conflicts here and there, but they knew how to resolve their conflicts. But today what we hear is different. And you both have alluded to this idea that the relationship between the two has been politicized, not by the two people, but by outsiders. Could you elaborate on what you meant by that without even getting into the Liu police in detail, Professor Mohammed?
Well, in the first place, Professor Mohammed Hassan said, since the Wayana came to power, it started the so-called federation system. It's not a federation. And with this federation system, it created an artificial boundaries between the people. And these boundaries, if you have got a boundaries, then you have got a psychological boundaries too. They built up boundaries, and with these boundaries, they built within our people too a psychological barriers. They put there a wall between us. They said there's yours and there's mine, which never existed before. And the two people, there was a cross-cultural relationship. But now this cross-cultural relationship, they put it with an intention so that the two people can separate from each other, and they have formed a kind of an artificial identity to every. I said to every either on the Oromo side or either on the Somali side, and now what they have built up again is notorious people, psychopath like Abdi Ile or something like that. And these people are trying to play within the people and trying to divide the people who used to live before, with a harmony, and they used to live in a peace, with the exchange of intermarriage, with the exchange of culture, with the exchange of economical exchange and everything, what they have it. And now they put this into a political and a wrong political, a negative political system, which is really a damaging political politics, which is damaging both nations. Now, what is the people who are not the common people, who doesn't understand what is going on? Now they tell. Now I'm talking on the side of the Somalis, even the people I'm talking. Now they have the intention that the Oromo is expanding itself territorial, and they want to annex the land of the Somalis. This is the understanding of the Somali people. The Oromos, the idea of the Oromos and the idea of the Oromo movement, and even this revolutionary movement, even most of the people couldn't understand it. This is a revolution. This is a new change. A change not only for the Oromos, a change for the whole country, a change for the Somalis themselves, because they are the neighbors. If there is a change in Oromia, then there is a change in our people. If there is a freedom for the Oromo people, then there is a freedom for us. And this is what we didn't transmit it also, from the intellectual side, that they couldn't transmit it. That's what is the freedom of the Oromo, to whom is this the freedom of the Oromo people? It's not only a freedom for the Oromo people, but also a freedom for the Somalis too, and freedom for the other Ethiopian people. This is what the people never understood it. And what they understood it is this, and this is the propaganda of the Wayana, and the propaganda was, the notorious, the so-called Somali regional government. What they projecting to the people, what they telling the people, is such kind of a false propaganda that the Oromos are intended to expand itself, and they want the Somali territory to annex it. This is the problem.
Well, let's pick up with this idea that first they created a psychological barrier, and then a physical boundary, and then put someone in power to run errands for them or implement their message, and then saw propaganda saying that the Oromos are expanding, they're going to swallow you up. All right, that's important. Professor Mohammed Hassan, what's your take on that? How is that politicization, how did that happen and now escalating into some unwanted conflicts in the area?
Scale, that is a very good question. First, let me say earlier, I did not mention that as related people are the neighbors. The Somalis and the Oromos have always exchanged cultures, their produce, traded with each other, married from each other, as Professor Mohammed said. Basically, there was really a lot of interaction. And this is what I witnessed growing up, basically. And in the past, our people, the Somalis and the Oromos, they did not live in the ideal world of 100%, harmony and so on, as every human society have. There were conflicts, but these conflicts were really limited, and they were not ideologically motivated, and the conflicts were solved through traditional mechanism. Now it is almost impossible to solve the conflict through the old mechanism. Let me explain why. Since 1991 in Ethiopia, it is the TPLF that controls the Ethiopian government. And everyone knows the TPLF represents a minority. And it is only by dividing, by turning people against each other, that they have managed to survive all the way up to now. And they will definitely continue this policy of divide and destroy, divide and conquer. And what makes the situation now really extremely worrying and with huge consequence is they are now using what they created, the Liu police. Basically, the Liu police originally was created for one purpose: to fight against the ONLF, Ogaden Liberation Front, that really managed to, that pinned down the TPLF army in the regional state, and probably the greatest daring, the most, how would I say, spectacular attack the ONLF carried out was in April 2007. I still vividly remember when the ONLF attacked the Chinese-run oil exploration area, killing a number of Chinese as well as TPLF officials, military and civilian personnel. And with that single blow, with that single attack, the ONLF destroyed the TPLF leaders' plan for exploiting the resources, the oil resources of Ogaden. Basically, the exploration simply stopped there. The goal was essentially to use the resources of the Somali regional state for enriching the TPLF leaders. And that outraged the late Prime Minister, and this is well documented. He actually launched a scorched earth policy, a policy of destroying everything, basically killing people, animals, poisoning water wells. And in the process, this is again a matter of documentation. From 83 to 111 Somali villages were destroyed, especially in the areas where there was a strong support for ONLF. And once the news of this scorched earth policy in the Somali regional state was leaked outside, there was an outcry. I still remember when the issue was raised, even in the US Congress, basically. There was such a massive human rights violation in the Somali regional state, and it was to deal with this issue. The late Prime Minister came up with the idea of establishing what is known as the Liu Police Force, a special force. Its original goal was very, very clear. They were to fight against the supporters and the members of the ONLF, and they hunted them down for years. And in fact, the Liu police really committed a crime against humanity, against the Somali people itself. It was only after 2014 the TPLF leaders started using and expanding actually the Liu police force. They started using it for two purposes. First, to wage their war against Al-Shabaab in Somalia itself. Look at this. In the Somali regional state, it was with the Somali themselves that they were destroying other Somali groups, any opposition that existed against their rule. And they extended that terror into Somalia itself in the name of fighting against Al-Shabaab. Once the Oromo protests started in 2014, and especially in 2015, and then the Liu police really were used for the purpose of attacking so many of the villages, actually, from which now the Oromos have been removed, basically. Remember, the Liu police are trained, armed, provided with uniform, provided with weapons, including heavy machine guns, and with trucks, and sometimes supported by helicopter. In other words, basically they are the army of the Ethiopian state, and the TPLF really wants to plant enmity between the Somali people and the Oromo people. The propaganda Professor Muhammad rightly mentioned from the Somali side, especially from Jijiga, from their television and the radio program, they simply feed people with wrong information, saying the Oromos are expanding and they are out to get your land. It is the reverse. Essentially, what they are really doing is to infiltrate Oromo areas, attack suddenly, and then force people to flee. And that has been happening. Now it is on a larger scale. And it is really very frightening what they are doing. Remember, governments come and go. The Wayanes will not be there for ever. But the Somalis and the Oromos will be there. And the people must understand the Wayanes are playing a game against the lives of the Somalis as well as the Oromos. Today, they are using the Liu police against the Oromo. If there is a problem in Ogaden or even in Somalia itself, the Wayanes will never hesitate using the Liu police against the Somalis themselves. And the point I am trying to leave is very simple. We should not fall into the trap of the TPLF. They wanted the Oromo and the Somali to become enemies who will be fighting for a generation to come. And they should never be allowed. We should never be the instrument for the TPLF so that they extend their rule by few more years. That will not happen.
Well, thank you, Professor Mohammed. I think important issues that we need to underscore is that the Oromo and the Somali peoples are not only brothers in the sense of mutual interdependence and ecological interdependence and sharing the same space, but they are also sharing the history of persecution, not only today, but also in regimes past. Today, what we are seeing is that the regime in Addis Ababa, the minority government in Addis Ababa, and in its constant power in Addis Ababa, is using what it created to fight ONLF guerrillas. First, it used against the Somali people. Now it is extended it into Oromia. So that's really important. But it's not only the Liu forces that are really participating. They are not the only actors here. There are also other actors. For instance, we have seen helicopters. We have seen army trucks. Are there other actors that are really complicating this relationship between the two? Professor Mohammed Zakaria Hassan.
In the first place, the Professor Mohammed Hassan put it clearly on the point. And that was the correct analysis what he did it. A very, very, very good analysis. I like it that. There's also something about the Liu police. In the first place, one, you should have to know the Somali people were totally paralyzed. Were totally paralyzed. And in every aspect, economically and physically, psychologically, totally paralyzed, not only by the Wayane, even by its own people, you know, with the so-called the Somali regional government. The new policy itself is not only the purpose of fighting ONLF, but also the purpose of assuring the oil and gas reserve areas, so that the Wayane can exploit in the near future. The people in Jigjiga, or the government in Jigjiga, is just a band of mafia who is working with the mafia of the Wayane. It's nothing else, only just to steal and to rob, you know, the rich of these people. The other thing is that the Somalis are economically put down, so that they don't have no other economical resources. And physically, if there is a kind of a movement, there is a collective punishment against the Somali people, totally. Now I'll come to your question. The Abyssinian government, I don't know the history of Menelik, but from Haile Selassie, what I knew to, I grown up, the people of the Oromo and the people of the Somalis, the genocide that have been committed used to be from the Ethiopian government, military government, or the Polish government, or the Ethiopian forces. That was the time of Haile Selassie and the time of the Derg. They were using their own forces. But now, what they have created is, on the Oromo side, they've created the OPDU, who has got its own forces, and trying to chauvinise or trying to infiltrate in the Oromo revolution and the Oromo masses with a intention of national chauvinism, a kind of a national chauvinism, what we have seen by the Abyssinians. Such kind of a national chauvinism is trying to infiltrate in the revolution of the Oromo people. This, you know, is a kind of a thing that we should have to keep on eye and see it what's going on, you know, with the Oromo revolution and the OPDU, what is going on, what is doing inside the Oromo revolution. Here in the Somali people, we don't have no mass basis which is now to that extent, but that the Oromo now did it. We don't have this kind of thing, and I wished we had this. And I'm trying to tell my people, it's time to stand up and to fight and to struggle for the justice like the Oromo people, and to solidarize with the Oromo people. This is one thing that I have to say. But we should have to keep on eye that the Wayane is always trying and will ever try in order to break the Oromo revolution, so it have to use all kind of means. It have to use all kind of means. Now, one they got it is to create a conflict, an ethnical conflict between the Somalis and the Oromos. So that to say, look, what's going on in Ethiopia is not a revolution, but an ethnical conflict. They want to divert this revolution of the Oromo revolution, and they're going to try, you know, this revolution to make it into an ethnical war between the two nations that used to live side by side peacefully. And so these kind of things we should have to be on mind, that we have to try to convince our people, to tell our people, especially the new generations, the generation that is growing on, all the intellectuals and all the other people, to tell them that this kind of a fake conflict between the Somalis and people is something created by the Wayane, and the Wayane wants to prolong its power in order to prolong its power, so it has to form this kind of a Machiavellian divide and rule system so that it exists longer than it's planned. We know that this regime won't exist anymore. It's just a failed state and it's total failure. In Ethiopia, it doesn't exist what is called, a rule of law. The rule of law is now out. There is no rule of law in Ethiopia. It wants to create a civil war within the people. What's going on is a kind of a new civil war. And this is what the intention of the Wayana is, to create this kind, like the Somali clan conflict, what happened in Somalia. It's the same method, not only that in Somalia it was a clan, but here is between ethnical group, between nations. That is what we want to create, and this is a very, very, very dangerous thing. It's a very dangerous thing for our people, especially for the Oromo and for the Somali people. This is a very, very dangerous thing, and this is we should have to be careful, and we should have to try to tell our people this is very dangerous, and there is a civil war coming in soon if we don't stop it. And if you don't stop it, the Wayana, and if we don't unite our forces together, this what I'm going to transmit. Thank you.
Yeah, you raise an important question, two important questions here, and I will come to Professor Mohammed for more comment on this. I think the Liu police was actually created when the Ethiopian government at the center was stronger than it is today. It was under Meles when the person that actually dominated all Ethiopian political, economic, and military and security forces was in power. So at strength, he used it to terrorize the Somali region so that it would be free for the exploration of gas. That's one thing. But what Professor Zakaria Hassan is saying is that it is actually a weak government at the center, weakened by the Oromo revolution, that is trying to fan ethnic conflict between Somalis and Oromos so that it could protract itself in power. And that's an important consideration to look at it. Now, what I want us to discuss is this, that ethnic conflict, especially the kind between Somali and Oromo, is not just a regular ethnic conflict for a number of reasons. Why? There are many Somalis that live among the Oromo on the highlands. And there are as many as a million Oromo that live among the Somali people in the Somali inhabited areas. So an ethnic conflict between these two is not like a regular ethnic conflict with a known boundary. It would be a war of all against all. That is the kind of implication that it may have in the Horn of Africa region. But it's not even limited to the Horn of Africa region. The consequences could be bigger than that. What do you think, Professor Mohammed Hassan in Georgia? What do you think is the implication, the greater implication of not dealing with this issue and nipping it at the bud?
Again, this is a very good question. I am absolutely not convinced that the TPLF leaders want to solve this problem. Rather, they want to intensify it because their legitimacy, they don't have any legitimacy. What is left is basically destroyed. And everywhere, our people, the Oromo, the Amharas, southern people, everywhere, people are challenging their authority, not only their authority, but they are opposing to their iron fist. Remember, they have been ruling through massive security apparatus. They could kill, they could confiscate, they could do anything. Is there any government like the Ethiopian government that uses the name of federalism while not implementing an idea, even a very simple idea of federalism itself, removing millions of people from their land? You know, earlier I forgot to mention a point, a very important point. You know, in 2007 and then later on, several Somali clans in the Somali regional state where there are prospects for oil, where reserves of oil were found. They were cleared of the land. Basically, what the TPLF really wanted, and they still want, is the resources, nothing else. If the Somalis are destroyed in the process, they care less. And it is the same thing. Today, the TPLF government is challenged at every level. The only card they have left is to plant ethnic conflict, which leads to ethnic cleansing. Let me make one point very clear. Ethnic conflict does not lead to ethnic cleansing. It leads to ethnic cleansing only when it is organized by state actors, when it is ideologically motivated. And the TPLF leaders, they know what they are doing. They want to crush the Oromo resistance that has continued for more than 2 years. And the best way of crushing that is, one, by multiplying enemies, Oromo enemies everywhere, by waging war. Earlier, I did not complete actually what I wanted to say. The Liu police is used for attacking, and then the Liu police has a massive support from Agazi, from the TPLF soldiers itself. Their weapons, everything, their support really comes. This is the war the TPLF leaders conduct on the Oromo. Today it is on the Oromo, tomorrow it may be on the Somalis, tomorrow it may be on the Amharas. This war should not really continue because the implication is very huge. It may lead to removing population from the areas. Where will that stop? Essentially, what the TPLF leaders really wanted to project to the outside world is that this is a conflict between the Oromo and the Somalis, and they are the only force in the area to maintain peace and so on. And they have been milking this propaganda for the last 26 years. We are the pillar of stability. They project themselves as a pillar of stability in the Horn of Africa. And the people must really become, especially Somali elite, the Somali, our brothers, Somali people must really realize. Remember, since 1992, the TPLF have been meddling in the Somali affairs in Somalia itself. And they invaded Somalia in 2006. You remember December 2006? The Ethiopian army is still in Somalia, essentially, in the name of fighting against Al-Shabaab. They caused incredible damage in Somalia itself, in the Somali regional state. Now they are extending that terror to the Oromo areas. And as I said earlier, what they really want is to force the Oromo to submit to their administration, how would I say, to give up resistance. And people who are politically conscious, and there is no doubt the Oromo people have really gained a great deal of political awareness. They will not be cowed into submission, and the people will continue resisting as much as possible, peacefully and through other means as much as possible. And the plan, the TPLF plan for the Oromo, for the Somali, is really for them, as I said earlier, to destroy each other. And we should never fall into their trap.
Well, thank you. I think you raised a number of points, at least for the English audience to understand. It's important to understand that this is a severely weakened government after the loss of the previous government leader, and especially after the Oromo movement, severely weakened government. It has always intervened in regional affairs in Eritrea, in Djibouti, and in Somalia in particular, militarily. It spares nothing to remain in power, to eliminate threat. And it could even resort, as you were just saying, to fanning ethnic conflict that would result in ethnic cleansing. So it will not stop. This government is not going to stop. It has a track record in this area. But I really want us to underscore the fact that this danger of fanning ethnic conflict is not going to be limited into that area. It's going to go beyond the Horn of Africa. Could you comment on that, Professor Zakaria Hassan, on the implications of not doing something today by the international community, not opening their eyes to what may happen if they ignore it? This is just a tribal conflict as they have done historically.
In the first place, Professor Mahmoud has stated, let me come to Somalia and Al-Shabaab with Ethiopia. The creation of Al-Shabaab was the Ethiopians, the Ethiopian army. What they used to do was they go after the Shabaab, they let the weapons there, and just come out. And then Al-Shabaab used to receive all these weapons. And they never wanted any stability in Somalia, and they never wanted a united Somalia, till now. But now, what's amazing is Ethiopia was only just looking Somalia as enemy, and was projecting its enmity within the Somalis, either the Somalis in Ethiopia or either the Somalis in Somalia. They never expected that there will be an Oromo revolution. That was a big shock. They never prepared for that. This revolution was a big, how could I explain it? It went like a bullet to the heart. And now, because they cannot now put this revolution backwards, because it was unexpected. The Oromos were segmented, and they never expected that a united Oromo. A united Oromo that will stand, for one cause, and that's the cause of freedom. That was a big shock for them. Now, they have tried to break it with a mass of massacre, genocide. All young people and politicians were imprisoned. Indiscriminately, young people, children, women, they have never left it. But the Oromo revolution continued even more. So what do they have to do? Because on the international community, they have to say something. What's going on in Ethiopia? So they should have to find something. First, they say they are terrorists. That time, when Merkel went to Ethiopia, the prime minister said, "We're going to fight the terrorists." When the incident in Nazareth, that the young people started, revolting that in Nazareth. And that was, he said it, that a lot of young people and a lot of people were massacred there. That's what he said to Frau Merkel, to the Chancellor Merkel, they are terrorists. He never said that it's a mass movement. He said it's a terrorist. Now, nobody wanted to buy this kind of propaganda. So they have to insinuate something else. And that's an ethnical conflict. In Ethiopia, there is an ethnical conflict between two big nations, the Somalis and the Oromos. And we're trying to bring peace in the country, and we're trying, to reestablish the law of state. That's what they wanted, wanted to sell, outside. But this won't happen. This won't happen for two reasons. In the first place, this regime is now out. It exists only just formally, but it doesn't exist within the people. It doesn't exist within the people. Secondly, the Oromo revolution became like a virus to the other nation in Ethiopia. It's affecting. So the incident with the Somalis and Oromos is only only a short. It's only a short incident. It won't go longer. But for the Somali people, then they will get a new consciousness. They will build up a new consciousness out of this mess. And with this new consciousness, they will know that this is a real revolution, and they should have to stand for this revolution. And they should have to stand, together with the Oromo people, because there is no other solution. They cannot massacre, and for them it's impossible to fight or to commit a genocide against the Oromos. That will never happen. This will never happen, and I know that will never happen within the people of the Somalis. And I know within the people of the Oromos this will never happen. This is only a short incident, and we should have to count this as a short epoch of a historical epoch. But we should have to see in the long run what's going on. What have we have to do in the long run, to tell our people, to persuade our people, to teach our people, not only that we are brother and sister, but how can we construct this revolution? How can the continuity of this revolution will go on, so that we can reach, the goal of just getting rid of this regime. This is what we have. This is what we have to think about it. And if we do this, and if we try to, in both sides, teach our people that what's going on in Oromia, or what's going on within the Oromia, is a revolution. It's not an expansionism or national chauvinism, but it's a revolution. And so that the Somali people have to understand this is a revolution, and they know that there were the oppressed people had oppressed people than the other Ethiopian nationalities, and they should have to stand for this. They have to stand for their own liberty, and this is the important thing.
Yep, I think it's important that you underscore, Professor Zakaria Hassan, the importance and the implications of the Oromo revolution within Ethiopia. So what you're saying is, both you're saying this is the last ditch battle for a government that is going down, and governments that are about to go down, especially dictatorial ones, are dangerous. So what I really wanted us to underscore again to the international community is not only the specter of ethnic cleansing, but also the specter of state collapse. Here is why I say this. When you have two large units of a federation, that is the Oromia National Regional State and the Somali National Regional State, pointing fingers to each other. Keep this in mind. These are members of the same federation, the same country, supposedly. But they're accusing each other of murder, terrorism, and other things. Now, this doesn't bode well for the federation itself when two large chunks of the federation are blaming each other and accusing each other of very, very violent crimes. So there is that the specter of state collapse, which is really dangerous. What do you think, Professor Mohammed Hassan, that would mean for the international community, that it should act now to prevent these grotesque outcomes of ignoring the facts today?
I have a very strong feeling that Europeans, American politicians, they all have great deal of information about what is happening in Ethiopia. They see the opposition that exists are fragmented, and essentially without the support from outside, without the financial support from the Western world, the Wayanes, I'm not exaggerating, the Wayanes will not survive for a year. What sustains them is the resource they get from outside, Of course, they project themselves as the pillar of peace in the region. Essentially, they are the source of problems in the region, in Somalia, in Ethiopia itself. You know, today they are fanning the flame of ethnic conflict between the Somali and the Oromos. Tomorrow, they, mark my words, it has already started. They will start the same thing with the Amhara, between the Amhara and the Tigrayans itself. There is no way of stopping. The Wayanis definitely will do everything to, if they fail, the one option they have, which they have already said, you know, katafan at fiten in nitafalen. You know, basically, if we lose, we will get rid of the country, and the people must really learn about this element. And if the people understand the magnitude of the crisis our people are facing, and the people are realistic, there is a possibility, there is a strong possibility of actually sustaining a viable state post Wayanis. The Wayanis may, remember, they are governments. Governments will not always exist. And before they go, definitely they will cause great deal of destruction. If people understand, if common sense develops, probably people back home have more common sense than the propaganda that comes from the Somali regional state or from our side. People will definitely understand. And what helps everyone in the region, including Somalia, is really peace and stability. A viable system that will bring people together, not create condition for people for destroying each other. I'm not sure if I communicate what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think we have raised important issues, that this conflict is not between the Somali and Oromo people. They've always lived together. Whenever they have conflict, they have resolved them through alternative means of conflict resolution. That is important. But we have now a third party. The Ethiopian central government has always intervened in the affairs of the periphery. And this is a continuation. But what makes it dangerous today is a government that is losing power, but determined to cling to power. And if they're going to lose power, they're going to destroy everything. But the consequences of losing authority in that area, the consequences are not going to be limited to Somali and Oromo. They're going to have ramifications, as you just said, Professor Mohammed Hassan, in the whole of Ethiopia. And there is a lot of evidence here for this, that they're fanning conflicts, not only in the eastern part. People should keep in mind, we're talking about a border area between the Somali regional state and the Oromo regional state that stretches from the eastern part to the southern part, about 1,000 kilometers. And there is conflict in all of these areas. But there is also beginning of some conflict in the west. This is a grand scheme of the Wayani to remain in power. Why? Because everything that they tried to resolve issues within the country have failed, including military intervention. When you have lost all legitimacy and you have used all your ammunitions in your and the tools in your toolkit, you will be resorting to scorched earth, and then if I don't get it, let everybody lose it. So that is a very difficult prospect that we're facing. But if you have a message for the people, especially those in the diaspora who can hear you, you have a short message for people in order that when governments fail, people actually step in and stabilize the situation. Do you have a message, Professor Zakaria Hassan, for people, a very short one?
In the first place, I want to say something about the international community before I go this. Mohammed Hassan has also he stated, that the help that the Wayana is getting from the international community is immense from Europe and from America. At the same time, I've talked with some of the foreign affairs of the German government, and I wrote them, and I said you should have you have to rethink about your relationship with Ethiopia. What some of them told me is that because there are not forces, democratic forces that they want to talk. Here, what we don't have is, what we don't have here within the whole country is the Oromo movement is for itself, and other movements are for itself, even though, they say, there is an ONLF from the Somali part, there's the Gimbot Sabat, but all this, what we need is an organization, a united organization, with a united democratic minimum program to build up, so that we can talk with the international community that there is this organization, and this organization who is now representing the country of Ethiopia, with all the nationalities included. And if this, we need avant-gardists. We need people who are taking, this responsibility, and we need all the intellectuals, the Ethiopian intellectuals, to come together, to sit together, and form a minimum program for the country. And with this minimum program, then we should have to face the international community, and so the international community, then they have with people to deal with them, and with the people to discuss about the matters of the country. So that's what we don't have now. Now it's only for the Oromos, and there's some other nationalities, their own groups. But what we need is this united front, and we have to build this united front. If we do this, then all these things, all this mess will never happen. The conflict between the ethnic conflicts will never happen if we do if we build this kind of leadership. And this is what we need. What we need is a leadership within the Ethiopian societies, especially from the intellectuals. And this is if we have to have this kind of organization if we want in the near future, so that we want a peace, and to make it a peace process and a peace transitional government. If we want a peace transitional government, so this is what we now need. And that's what I want to say to all the people too.
Professor Mohammed Hassan?
By nature, I am not a pessimist. Generally, international community do not listen to people who are weak, people who are divided. If international community, especially the Western world, the government of the United States, the British, the Germans, the French, if they really care about the future of the people of Ethiopia, they must put great deal of pressure on the Wayanes, on the current government, to stop this slide to great tragedy. This has to be stopped before a great danger really takes place. When it is too late, there is not much to do. And the best time to stop this crisis is they have two options. One, to put great deal of pressure on the Wayanes to stop this before it goes further. People should never be uprooted from their areas and then driven out of the areas where they have lived for hundreds of years. Today it is with the Oromo, tomorrow guess who will be? And secondly, they have really to tie their financial support with them stopping this war, the war that is going on. And the most important, the people in Ethiopia must really start clearly realizing today it is the Oromo. Remember, the Wayanes have touched every group in Ethiopia, and the people must rise up. The cry, the pain, the days, the destruction of the Oromo, the destruction of the Amara, the destruction of the Sidama, the Konso, must be taken as the destruction of all. And the people must come to the support of each other. You know, basically, if anyone says, oh, it is Oromo, let them be punished today. Tomorrow, the Wayanes will visit everyone. And the people in Ethiopia, especially the diaspora, must realize the danger that hangs over all the people in the area. The Western world, if they care about the safety, the well-being, the future of the people of Ethiopia, this is the time to put pressure on the TPLF regime in Ethiopia.
I think we have gone back to where we started.
Okay, well, Mohammed, it's not only this pressure because these people won't put that hard pressure with this government unless they see a kind of alternative organization, a very strong organization. This is
the message. The message is loud and clear.
Then they will start, putting pressure on the government, and then they will start saying, now is the time for a change of government. That time, that they will say, we need a change, and so is what we need is now is this a united front organization. This we should have to be. We should have to work with this, and this. All the Ethiopian diaspora have to work within the country and outside the country too.
I think that's what we have said. I think this is a very difficult and intractable problem. It's not because there is a conflict between Oromo and Somali, but this is a politically engineered conflict. And the government at the center is not going to stop at anything from inflicting a whole lot of damage. But here is what the message that you both conveyed. The West doesn't know how to prevent tragedy. It only responds to tragedy after the fact.
Yes.
Because of that, people who have goodwill for the Oromo and the Somali people and for the whole of Ethiopia, the Ethiopians themselves should get organized and then get rid of the evil, the poison that had poisoned the entire fabric of the Horn of Africa. Well, thank you for your analysis. Thank you for your time. This is a stark message that you have conveyed. I hope that we get together in better times to discuss peace. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you, Mohammed.